Gentleman from Massachusetts yields back, and the gentleman is from New York. Mr. Garbarino is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for holding this hearing, and thanks to the witnesses for being here today. Mr. Berry, we're pleased to hear that those across the aisle are concerned with shareholder democracy. In the spirit of promoting shareholder democracy, would you agree that if a shareholder proposal is rejected time and time again by a majority of shareholders, that their voting preferences should be heard, that there should be a cooling-off period for it being resubmitted?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Mr. Netram, in the spirit of promoting shareholder democracy, should two proxy advisory firms be able to dictate 30% of proxy votes? Shouldn't the shareholders themselves be voting and not auto-voting the preferences of third parties?
I believe the shareholders themselves should be voting for their preferences.
Thank you. It has been suggested, Mr. Netram, that the cost of shareholder proposals is just an hour of work. Can you, at a high level, discuss the cost to companies?
Sure. The real cost of the companies lies on the time and attention that executives are diverting from the operation of the underlying business. In the manufacturing sector in particular, we're facing a set of challenges that are existential, and taking the executive's attention away from that and navigating these incredibly turbulent waters is not helpful to shareholder value creation.
So, just an hour of work that's not true. It's going to take a long time. What about retail investors? Is there a cost to them? Presumably they have to read through the proposals to make informed decisions. Some companies have millions of retail investors. Is that time quantifiable?
It must be quantifiable. I don't know what the answer is, but I'm sure that it is.
Wouldn't making our markets more efficient and letting boards focus on sound financial policy rather than political platforms enhance capitalism?
I strongly agree with that statement.
Thank you. I want to ask you now about impacts to the changes to Bulletin 14L. Companies are facing more and more detailed environmental, social, and political proposals that are intended to interfere with regular business operations. One publication that has helped fuel this pattern is the SEC's Staff Legal Bulletin 14L, which made a number of changes that broaden the scope of what could be deemed eligible for a company's proxy statement. One of those changes is the altering of ordinary business exclusion, effectively removing the long-standing requirement that there be a connection between a proposal and the company. Mr. Netram, how does the shareholder proposal process change when the SEC limits the availability of no action relief under Rule 14A 8? Additionally, how can this change interact with the operations or business of a company?
It fundamentally alters the way in which a business is run. If you remove that nexus between the core operation of the business and the shareholder proposal to open that up to really anything under the sun, you really are taking the time and attention away from running your underlying business.
So you said you could open anything up under the sun, which means it could allow shareholders to influence more of the day-to-day operations of a company, right?
That is correct.
Yeah. So can you explain how the increased level of detail and specificity in shareholder proposals create governance risks by distorting the board decision-making process?
Absolutely. I think it goes beyond distorting the decision-making process to actually giving greater power to shareholder activists, in that under the new regime, you're allowed to make minor alterations to a proposal, infinite versions of alterations to proposals, and have corporate management be forced to consider each of those in turn.
Is there any way to reform Rule 14A8 to combat the submission and resubmission of non-germane shareholder proposals?
Yes, I think we need to go back to actually ensuring that proposals that are germane to the underlying business are the focus.
Dr. White, the SEC's proposed amendments to Rule 14A8 would tip the scales in favor of a small group of like-minded shareholders whose objectives may not be aligned with the objectives of Main Street investors or the best interests of the company and shareholders. Can you discuss the SEC's proposed amendments? Yeah, and the potential impact they will have on the public markets?
Thank you for that question. So yes, there were 3 proposed amendments. One was the substantial implementation exclusion, and it says that if you have already substantially implemented the subject matter with the same objective and the same means, then you can exclude it. The new rules would require that you approve that in order to achieve that exclusion. The duplication exclusion, if there's duplicate proposals. I'd mentioned earlier, if you have two or three activist shareholders that want to achieve the same objective, they can propose 2 or 3 different means, and it can appear on the proxy. And for example, Amazon had 18 shareholder proposals on its proxy this year. If these rules were to move forward, it would make it even harder to remove.
I ran out of time. Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.